Full disclosure, I am recording this the week of the Super Bowl. This is in the past. I'm recording a lot of draft content Super Bowl week. I'm at the Underdog house here in Phoenix. We're staying here for 5 days to cover the game and, talk about best ball and fantasy and everything that's going to happen in 2023, including the offseason of one Houston Texans organization. And I made one request of Underdog that if I was going to talk about the Texans and everything that's gone very, very wrong, and hopefully things that will go very, very right, in order to do it, I needed an absolutely irresponsible amount of tequila. And they obliged. And this is really good tequila, by the way. I have no idea how many bottles they brought, but it's definitely more than a few. And I think they just wanted me to be as comfortable as possible when talking about the team that I unfortunately love. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. We're just going to get right into this thing. We're going to do free agency first, and then the draft. A lot of picks to be made, a lot of money to be spent. So let's get to it. The first step of free agency is always going to be salary cap management because we do have to set ourselves up for success in free agency by doing a lot of housekeeping in terms of managing our cap. So we're going to do a couple things here to kind of set ourselves up for success, the first of which is trading Brandin Cooks. He still wants out of Houston to this day because he has no interest in being part of a rebuild, so we're going to grant that request, and we're even going to do him a solid by sending him to a contender like he wants to go to, and that's Kansas City. You might be wondering why Kansas City would want Brandin Cooks, and to put it plainly, 3 of their top 5 receivers are going to be free agents, and Brandin Cooks is better than all of them anyway. This deal benefits Cooks, it benefits KC, and there is a little bit of salary cap management that KC is going to have to do on their end as well. Luckily, Patrick Mahomes' contract is very flexible, so they can do that on their end. But to make it even easier on them, one of the things that's going to have to be done on Houston's side to kind of grease the wheels is they're going to have to pay half his salary just to get this deal done. So in total, Kansas City is going to send their 4th rounder, pick 135, and Houston is going to pay half of Cook's salary, like I mentioned. So instead of opening up $10.2 million in cap space for Houston, it's going to open up about $1.2 million. In the end, I think everybody benefits here. Houston gets a pick, KC gets a weapon, and the salary cap management is a little bit smoother for both teams. In addition to granting Cook's request for a trade, we're also going to cut Christian Kirksey, which frees up another $5.2 million, and we're going to restructure Malik Collins in order to free up about $4.8 million. Collins obviously is just a straight-up cut candidate himself, but I do think he's still a solid player that is worth the roster spot, so we're just going to opt for that restructure instead. That brings our total cap space for the Texans to about $49 million entering free agency, before we even do any other restructures that they could also do to open up even more space if they want to. One thing to take into account, though, is they do have a metric shit ton of draft picks this year before we even do the Brandin Cooks trade and get 135 back from KC. So their rookie pool is just a hair under 11 million just to sign all of their existing draft picks, and that's going to be about a dozen of them. So just to play it safe, we're actually going to treat that 49 million in cap space like it's actually 38 million because we do have to leave room for all of those rookies. I want a little bit more space to work with though, so we're going to do another little creative method to free up some money, and that's extending Tytus Howard. For me, he's a very solid right tackle who would be in my long-term plans anyway, and so doing that extension now is both going to give us short-term cap relief and make sure that we have a very good starting tackle duo going into this year. We're going to give him a 4-year extension for $80 million, $30 million guaranteed with a $20 million signing bonus, and we're going to have a very low base salary for 2023 as part of the restructure / extension, however you want to phrase it. So that's going to be about a $3 million base salary plus the $5 million of the signing bonus that's kind of spread out equally over all those 4 years. And that's going to make his cap hit just for 2023 at $8 million instead of $13.2 million, which it was going to be. Obviously, this deal is going to balloon big time on the back end, but we have time to plan for that. For now, I want to get that $5 million back from this extension, and that's going to give us $43 million of space to work with this year. So in total, going into free agency, we have $43 million of effective cap space for non-draft picks. Again, another $11 million for the draft picks, but that 43 is going to be crucial. And using that $43 million, here's what I would do with it. My number one priority is to build an environment where a young quarterback can thrive. That means locking down, obviously, key offensive line pieces and bringing in really top quality weapons if I can. We already shipped off Brandin Cooks because he didn't want to be here, but I still think there's an upgrade to be had at wide receiver by trading for Tee Higgins. And real quick, just as an aside, you might be wondering why the Bengals would even entertain this trade to begin with, because they're in the middle of a Super Bowl window and T is a big part of their offense, and I get that. But you need to understand the financial realities of the NFL, which is that not every ownership group has the same resources available, and every single guaranteed dollar for every single contract has to be put into an escrow account ahead of time. So you need a whole hell of a lot of liquid cash available in order to pay out a big guaranteed contract. Some owners can do that without blinking, and some owners cannot. And the Bengals ownership, if we're just being realistic about it, traditionally they haven't been able to generate that kind of liquid cash, or at least make that kind of liquid cash available to pay out a ridiculous amount of guaranteed dollars to multiple high-value players. They've always kind of had an unofficial policy that, other than the quarterback position, they don't really guarantee more than just the first year of an extension or of a free agency signing, and it's kind of hurt them in the past. They've made very few exceptions. AJ Green was one of them, but I mean, even looking back at their, free agency spending spree last year, if you look at all the guaranteed dollars they paid out, it was pretty much just for 1 year. They don't guarantee 2 or 3 years of a big money extension or a big money signing to star players because unless you're a quarterback, they just don't want to allocate that kind of liquid cash to put into escrow accounts. And looking at the big money extensions they have coming up that we know they're going to pay, obviously Joe Burrow and probably Ja'Marr Chase, I just don't know if they're going to have the same level of willingness to put that much guaranteed money aside for Tee Higgins as they would for the other two. I mean, hell, they took a stadium naming rights deal for the first time ever just to make sure they had enough cash to pay Joe Burrow. And that's before we even get to Ja'Marr Chase's eventual extension, which is going to be like $30+ million a year. I don't know. I just don't see them setting aside that kind of money for Tee Higgins, even though they love T as a player. This is just not an ownership group that is going to be able to generate $350 million guaranteed dollars in liquid capital for like 3 guys. It's just not going to happen. So for me, the motivation for Cincinnati is to strike while the iron is hot, get some really high value draft assets back for Tee Higgins, and send him to a franchise that actually is willing to pay him that many guaranteed dollars. It's a win for the Bengals, it's a win for the Texans, and it's a win for T's bank account. So in the end, I just think this makes sense from all sides. And as for the specifics of the deal itself, I'm going to give Higgins a 5-year, $150 million extension, so roughly in the ballpark of the annuals per year that Tyreek Hill's getting. And that's also going to come with $60 million guaranteed at signing and $80 million total guaranteed. And again, we're going to kind of play some games with the cap here, and the base salary is going to be $5 million per year for the first year, and the signing bonus is going to get spread out over those 5 years, and that's going to lessen the cap hit to $17 million for each of the first 2 years. And even though the 3rd and 4th year base salaries are going to be absolutely batshit insane, we do have time to plan for that and kind of plan for a restructure down the line. The Texans have $187 million of projected space as of this moment next year because everyone else is coming off the books, and they have $250 million in projected space the year after that. So basically the whole roster is a blank slate. We have time to prep for that cap hit. But for now, again, we need the space for this year, so we're just taking that $17 million cap hit for 2023, and we get an elite upgrade at receiver, which is the best result we can hope for after sending pick 12 and pick 74 off to Cincy. And I can't remember if I actually said the compensation earlier, so I just want to make sure I say it there. Again, pick 12 and pick 74 goes to Cincy, so they're happy. We get a receiver, T gets his money, everybody's good all around. That one move and trade kind of brings us down to $26 million still available. And with that $26 million, I really only have one other big money move to make, and that is paying Laremy Tunsil. I know that I traded him to the Bears in the Bears offseason video, but now I'm doing the Texans, and what I think is in the best interest of the Texans is to keep Laremy in Houston and be that blindside protector for a young quarterback. If we do a 4-year, $100 million deal with about $60 million guaranteed, which is right in line with the very top of the market, we can structure the deal to make it an $18 million cap hit for Tunsil. And obviously it goes without saying, just like the Tytus Howard deal and the Tee Higgins deal, this will balloon up to ridiculous levels down the line, but for now, we're going to fit what we can into 2023, which is that $18 million cap hit, and then we will deal with all the fallout later when we have a lot more space to work with and a quarterback that's going to be on a rookie contract. That deal will bring us down to about $6 million remaining on our 2023 cap, which I'm going to rest on for now and save for incidentals. So overall, to recap what we did here before we even get to the draft, again, we traded Brandin Cooks because he wanted out, and we got back pick 135 for him. We traded picks 12 and 74 for Tee Higgins and then gave him the bag. And we locked up a very good starting tackle duo for the foreseeable future by paying Laremy Tunsil and Tytus Howard. That is as stable a core of talent as any young rookie quarterback could ever hope to have around him. And that's as good of a segue as I could ever hope to write in order to talk about everything that we still got to do in the draft. Because remember, even though we did trade away a couple picks, we still have 11 more draft picks at our disposal. So why don't we go use them? I have been watching Bryce Young for many years at this point, since he was basically 16 years old and he transferred into my high school, which is Marte. I'm class of 09. He obviously went there many years after I did, but I remember going to his games on Friday nights. I even remember having a late night conversation at a gas station with his offensive coordinator, Coach Money, before he ever even played a game for Marte. And I have watched a lot of, D1 and professional quarterbacks go through that program. I have seen them all. And he looked me dead in the eyes and he says, "Brett, we have never had anyone like this kid. He is fucking ridiculous." And you know what? Coach Money was right. Bryce Young was pretty fucking ridiculous, both back then and now. He lived up to every ounce of the hype. He is, at least in my view, the best quarterback in this draft, even though he might not be the first one taken because, well, let's be honest, he hasn't really grown much since high school. He's a pretty small guy, relatively speaking, for quarterback prospects, but in terms of field vision and decision making and accuracy and, all the special stuff that just makes a good quarterback, Bryce Young is the best one in this class, and every single NFL general manager would agree with that. The one knock on him is size. That is literally it. So even though I'm not entirely sure he's going to go first overall, I can't really pass up the opportunity to draft him to Houston. I've just been watching him for so long, and I know what he can do on the football field, and I'm confident that as long as he's protected with a very good tackle duo and he's throwing to some really top-flight weapons like Tee Higgins, I'm willing to give it a chance. Could this blow up in my face because there's just never been a successful quarterback in the NFL at his size profile? Yeah, this could all go really south, but if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down swinging, and I'm going to take my shots with the kid who I've been watching for a very long time just absolutely carve up defenses. I'm a Bryce Young believer. I truly think he's going to work in the NFL, and I think that the Texans are very, very lucky to be in position to get him. Am I showing an incredibly disgusting amount of bias because he's a fellow Monarch and I will defend him to the death because of that? Yes, probably, and I think it's fair to criticize me for that, but you know what? I'm okay with it. I really do believe in him, and I think he's going to make an excellent Texan. We're going to skip over pick 12 because, again, we traded that away for Tee Higgins, and that is an absolutely fair trade in my book, and we're going to go straight down to the top of the second round, pick 34 overall. Will McDonald is one of the most fascinating defensive prospects in this class because I think that once we actually get his testing numbers, he's going to rocket up the board. He is a phenomenal athlete. Ridiculous first step. He's got great hips. He's got length. He's got power. He's got everything that you could want in an edge rusher profile, but he happens to be coming from a system that kind of artificially deflated his production. Iowa State played him mostly at like 5 technique and 4-eye, and they were playing a lot of 3-down fronts with a lot of 3-man rushes, and he just didn't get a whole bunch of clean pass rush reps. And so I think that his production, took a major hit because of that. But when you look at his actual pass rush reps that he got, clean one-on-ones where he's actually able to go rush the passer, I mean, he's one of the best in this class to me. So overall, I'm not entirely sure he's going to be available at 34th overall. You look around all the mock drafts right now, and he usually is. But I think once we kind of, get the national discourse on him to the right spot, which is, hey, here's a freak athlete that just wasn't really utilized properly, I do think that he could potentially jump a few of the edges that are going ahead of him right now. Say Nolan Smith, BJ Ojulari. There's a very, very deep edge class this year, and he's kind of the afterthought at the moment. But by the time we get to the draft, I don't think he will be. So, maybe this is a little bit too overly positive to think he's going to be there at 34, but I said the same thing about Arnold Ebiketie last year, and he slipped to the second round, so I guess you never know. Either way, Will McDonald, super exciting, super athletic edge prospect that I think D'Amico Ryans would just have a field day in terms of trying to develop him. And with that, let's get to the third round now at pick 66 overall. Luke Musgrave is another prospect that I'm only about 50% sure is actually going to be there at 66th overall, but just kind of based on current mock drafts and projections, he usually is, so I'm taking advantage of that. I think one of the big reasons why some people might have him going lower is because he missed most of last year with a knee injury, but in the first 2 games that he was actually on the field, he was by far Oregon State's leading receiver. Like, he pretty much was their passing offense at times, and I think he's a very exciting, at least pass-catching tight end prospect. As a blocker, he is, let's say, average at best. He pretty much just kind of gets in the way, but in terms of receiving ability, I am very, very high on Luke Musgrave. He's got a huge frame. He moves a lot better than you expect for somebody who's so tall. He's like 6'5", 6'6", and somebody at his size that still has the feet that he has and the hip fluidity that he has. It reminds me a lot of, like Mike Gesicki down in Miami. Again, you're not getting a whole lot as a blocker from him, but in terms of just a matchup weapon in the passing game, it's hard to do better than Luke Musgrave in this class. So we'll see how the medical checks go in Indy in terms of teams kind of checking up on that knee and seeing what the long-term prognosis is. And we'll see how much teams actually care about his lack of effectiveness as a blocker. There are some actual legitimate knocks to his profile. But again, in terms of receiving ability, I think he's a slam dunk pick and somebody who Bryce Young would very, very much love to throw to. Worst case scenario, I think he's going to be a huge third down and red zone target, and that is well worth the 66th overall pick to me. With that, we're going to move past pick 74. Again, we traded that away for Tee Higgins, still totally comfortable with that, and we're going to go all the way down to our next pick in the 4th round at 105 overall. Daiyan Henley, the linebacker out of Washington State, who's a grad transfer. He's somebody who I recently got to in terms of evaluation, but I immediately fell in love. He's had a very interesting football life in the sense that he's played DB before, he's played receiver, quarterback, he's returned, and you can kind of see this really unique athletic profile and all of his experiences show up as he's playing linebacker. He's got better feet than most linebackers have because of that experience playing receiver and DB. He reads patterns super well in terms of knowing where and when to be in coverage because he's got experience playing quarterback. And when he does get the ball in his hands, obviously he's a threat on returns because he used to actually be a returner as well. He is just a very unique profile for a linebacker prospect, And I think that it makes him one of the most exciting linebackers, not just in this class, but in any class. His athleticism is off the charts. He does things that even very few NFL linebackers could do from a physical standpoint. And even though it's a very lofty, damn near unrealistic comparison, we're talking like Fred Warner type skill set here on some of these plays. I'm not saying he is Fred Warner, but I'm saying that he does some things that Fred Warner does. And that's super exciting to me. In coverage, he's fantastic. As a blitzer, he's an incredibly athletic threat. In terms of a run and chase guy out in space, I mean, there's very few running backs that can get away from him because he's so damn fast. I just think if you take this physical skill set and his background playing multiple positions on multiple sides of the ball, and you give him to DeMeco Ryans, who is one of the very best developer of linebackers in the entire sport, I just think that there's no limit to what Daiyan Henley can be. He's not a perfect fit for every team, but he's definitely a perfect fit for the Texans, and that's what matters to me. I think if you take him and you plop him right next to Christian Harris, who also, by the way, is a former DB and super athletic and super rangy, you're going to have one of the most exciting young linebacker groups in the entire league. There will be growing pains because both of them are relatively new to the position, but in terms of upside, especially in coverage, man, they would be really, really tough to go against. So for me, sign me up for Daiyan Henley early in the 4th round. He might go well higher than this, again, because of his ceiling as a player. But for now, I think early in the 4th is a very safe bet. And specifically, his fit with the Texans would be a dream scenario for everybody. We're going to keep it in the 4th round here because we still have one more pick. Again, this is the pick we got back for trading Brandin Cooks to KC, and that is number 135 overall. I've talked multiple times about Chandler Zavala, both on this channel and on our podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast. We actually have an interview with him going live this week, and he's a very, very smart, cerebral player, but he also is an absolute ass kicker on tape. I think he's one of the most versatile guards in this class because he can play left side or right side. You could probably have him play center if you really need him to. He can even take some snaps at tackle in a pinch. And I think that his overall profile, one of versatility and smarts and a really good, wicked first step, I think he profiles as somebody who's going to play for 8 to 10 years pretty easily. I think he's an absolutely perfect fit for the run game that I think the Texans are going to try to build under Bobby Slowick, who obviously comes from the Shanahan tree over in San Francisco. So I expect a lot of inside zone. I expect, getting the guards out in space on counter, mixing in some inside zone and duo here and there. But really, I think it's more of a lateral run game. And Zavala fits that perfectly because his feet are really, really good. He's one of the most athletic guards in this class. So I think just kind of taking into account system fit, plus the fact that he's a really smart, athletic player that's very easy to get along with. I mean, he's a great interview, a great kid. He's going to fit in the room instantly. I just think it's pretty hard to spend your 4th round pick any better than Chandler Zavala. I think that he's probably going to end up being one of my most mocked players in this entire class at any position. And it's well-deserved. I really love everything about him, and I think that whatever franchise does end up drafting him is going to be very, very happy they did. And with that, we're going to go to our next pick, which, even though it is in the next round, which is the 5th round, it's only 4 actual picks later at pick 139 overall. Desjuan Johnson from Toledo is one of my favorite defensive line prospects in this class because he is kind of the best version of a tweener. He's got a very unusual prototype in the sense that he's about 6'2", 275, 280, and so he kind of floats in between defensive end and defensive tackle in terms of dimensions. But it's not that he can't play either, it's that he can play both. That's what makes him different. He's not a tweener in a bad sense, he's tweener in a positive sense. If you want to play a 4 down front, you can put him at 6 technique over a tight end and he would absolutely crush whatever tight end's in front of him. Or if you want to put him at 3 technique on the backside and say go hunt and play the run on the way to the quarterback, he can do that as well. I kind of liken him to Justin Tuck in terms of role, and I know that's very lofty expectations, and Tuck was even bigger than Desjuan Johnson, but in terms of that inside-outside versatility, where you can play defensive end on early downs and then kick him inside and play defensive tackle on passing downs, I really do think that he's perfect for that Justin Tuck-ish type of role. I think it's possible that Desjuan, maybe falls a little bit in the draft just because not every defensive coordinator would have a plan for how to use him. But I do think that this Texans defense under DeMeco Ryans would have a plan, and they would probably use him very similarly to how DeMeco used Charles Omenihu when he was with the 49ers. Ironically, Omenihu also a former Texan with kind of inside-outside versatility. When you look at how Omenihu was used, again, it was everything from like 6 technique to a 2-eye, and they would just kind of throw him on all these crazy stunts, and he was a really good penetrator as an interior rusher. I think Johnson would do the exact same thing. And I think that he could do it possibly even better than Omenihu because he's even more athletic than Omenihu. If you're just looking for a really high upside, interior, penetrating, hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end type player, I think Desjuan Johnson is the player for you. He's one of my absolute favorites in this class, and I really cannot wait to see where he goes. If he does go a lot higher than the 5th round, I would not be shocked at all, but he's just a much harder projection for a lot of teams, so I think it's fair to say he could slip again, but in terms of talent, he's better than a 5th round pick. Our next selection for Houston is in quite a while. It's about 50 picks away, but it's the first of 4 6th round picks that Houston owns. So we're going to wave goodbye to pick 139 and go all the way down to pick 189. One of the main things I wanted to come away from this class was somewhere on day 3 getting a complimentary running back for Dameon Pierce. And I think Deuce Vaughn is probably the prime candidate for that, because I do think that even though he's a very fun running back and one of the most exciting running backs in this entire class, he's probably going to fall a little bit because he's just not very big. In terms of official measurements, people kind of expect him to be somewhere around 5'6", 5'7", maybe 175, 180. So even by running back standards, he is positively tiny. But just throwing on the tape and completely ignoring the dimensions, he, again, is one of the most fun prospects in this entire class at any position. I think that it's pretty fair to say that Deuce Vaughn is one of the main reasons for Kansas State's success, because he was quite literally the engine of the offense. And even though he's not very big, his contact balance is excellent. He runs with a lot more power than you would expect, and his footwork and lateral agility is just breathtaking. He is one of the hardest to tackle running backs, not just in this class, but in any class. He can make you miss in a phone booth. He's got receiving ability. He can run inside. He can run outside. If he was just a couple inches taller and like 15 pounds heavier, he'd probably be a lock for early on day 2. His tape is that good. He just happens to be really, really small, which I guess if we're talking about the Bryce Young pick earlier, that's kind of a theme here. I'm just ignoring dimensions completely and going off of tape because, oh my God, his tape is fun. I have no idea where he's going to go in the actual draft. I just know that I really love watching Deuce Vaughn play football, and I cannot wait to see where he ends up. I think as a complementary piece to Dameon Pierce, who is very big and strong and violent and all the stuff we love about Dameon Pierce, I think that he's a perfect, kind of lightning to Pierce's thunder. And if he does go to Houston, I think that would just be absolutely amazing. And I really can't wait to see what they do together. So hopefully that happens. And as a Texans fan, I'm going to be spending the next couple months kind of manifesting that into existence, because I do think it would be amazing. And I think we as football fans deserve that kind of happiness. So with that, let's get to the second 6th round pick on the docket here, pick 206 overall. I first got exposed to Demario Douglas when I was at the Shrine Bowl down in Vegas a few weeks ago, and I was absolutely blown away with how far along he is as a receiver prospect. Like, it only took a few drills for me to realize that he was different than pretty much everybody on the field not named Zay Flowers. In terms of foot speed and, nuance as a route runner, how fluid his hips are, just how, overall developed he is as a football player, he doesn't look like a college receiver. He looks like a veteran NFL receiver. I was just stunned with how little work I think his future receiving coach is going to have to do once they get him in the building. Like, he's pretty much ready to go right now as a slot receiver. Obviously, he's not very big, so in terms of alignment versatility, like, he's not somebody that I'm putting outside. He is pretty much strictly a slot receiver. And he did go to a small school, and he didn't play always against top-flight competition, which, maybe will get held against him, which is why I have him in the 6th round here and not earlier. But in terms of just watching him on tape and, what he did at the Shrine Bowl, there's very few receivers in this class that I think are as developed as he is as a route runner. And maybe I am putting him too low here and he won't make it to the 6th round because of that, but I didn't really know where to put him because most people aren't talking about him yet. Like, he's not even on a lot of rankings. I don't see his name anywhere in mock drafts, so I don't really know where to value him. But just based on what I've seen with my own eyes, this is a legitimate NFL receiver. And I think that it would be a disservice if we just don't talk about him until he's drafted. He deserves to be talked about. He deserves to be analyzed. And he deserves to be mentioned with all the other, top flight slot receiver prospects in this class, because I think he is one of them. So just make sure you remember Demario Douglas, Liberty. We're going to be talking about him a lot more on this channel between now and the draft. And you know what? We're probably going to be talking about him a lot more over summer as well, because I do think he is that good. And with that, we're going to get to our 3rd 6th round pick for the Texans, which is only 2 picks after Demario Douglas, pick 204 overall. Scruggs from Penn State is another player that I first got exposed to at the Shrine Bowl and immediately fell in love, not just with his skill set, but with his personality. We also interviewed him over on the podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast. That interview is not out yet, but it will be soon. And he was just phenomenal to talk to. We sat down and we just kind of broke down protections and, talked about protection philosophy and, how you handle certain fronts, how you handle certain blitzes. He's really, really smart. I think that he could, walk in there and call protections day one, which, as a backup center / swing guard type is super important, because if your top center goes down, you need to have somebody who can get in there and call protections. And I did mention swing guard for a reason. I think that he could play any of the 3 interior spots. And I do mention that purposefully because if you are going to be investing in the 6th round in offensive line, you do want somebody who you do think can play multiple positions, because you're only dressing, 7 offensive linemen, maybe 8 offensive linemen at absolute most on any given game day. And so your backups need to be able to play multiple spots. And I think Scruggs can do that. Is he quite as athletic as some of the other center prospects in this class? Obviously not. Like, he's nowhere near John Michael Schmitz, but it doesn't mean that he's unathletic. He's just solid. You can run some outside zone with him. You can pull him a little bit. He's strong enough that, if you want to blow somebody off the ball in a double team on inside zone, he can do that. Like, he's not going to get stonewalled. He's just solid. Not spectacular, but solid. But he's really smart. He can play multiple spots, and I think that, for a 6th round pick, for a backup offensive lineman, just give me the stable, solid, smart guy that can fill in multiple places, and I think that's well worth the pick. Again, we're talking late day 3 guys here. We're not looking for stars. We're looking for guys to fill out the roster that won't shit their pants when they go in on game day, and I think that Scruggs perfectly fits that bill. If he had to take some snaps for me, I would be absolutely fine with it. I think he can do it. So I think he's a very solid pick. And with that, let's get to our final 6th round pick. Again, only 4 spots after this one at pick 208 overall. Marte Mapu is really, really fascinating because I don't entirely know what position he's going to play between safety and nickel and linebacker. And I'm just kind of willing to figure that out as we go. I just want him on the roster so that we can develop him and figure out his role over time. He's a really unique profile in the sense that he's a 6'3", 215-pound hybrid player that's kind of built like a linebacker, but kind of moves like a DB, and you're not entirely sure he can do both full-time. But for me, like projecting his role, I at least want to see what he can do as my tight end eraser. Like if we are in pure passing situations and I just got to put somebody out there against, Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or Dalton Schultz or whoever, and I got to be able to hold up in man coverage, I think that most DBs are too small and most linebackers are too slow. So I'd just rather have Mapu as this hyper specialized anti-tight end weapon. That is what I think he can do while we develop him to do other stuff. Plus, I think he profiles as a pretty good blitzer and as a special teams guy as well. So if his role is just really narrow at first, which is special teamer and then, big nickel anti-tight end blitzer guy, whatever role we want to call that, I think he can do that at first while we teach him all the other stuff. And that hyper specialization is probably why he's going to go somewhere on day 3 and not earlier, even though he is going to test really well and he does have, pretty attractive size. I think it's just the fact that most teams don't really know what he is going to work against him, and he is going to fall in the draft. Plus, he played at Sacramento State, not a super high level of competition, and one of the only times we ever got to see him go against top-flight competition was at the Senior Bowl. So all of those things kind of work in my favor for getting him all the way down in the 6th round, and I'm just going to draft him and figure out the role as I go. And with that, we are now at our final pick of the draft here for the Texans rebuild, pick 240 overall in the 7th round. Jack Colletto is another one of these really interesting, late day 3 multi-role, flyer type picks, in the sense that he could technically play multiple positions and you're not entirely sure which one yet, and you're just going to draft him and figure it out. He played both linebacker and fullback, which to me just screams, 7-year special teams ace, which I love. But I also think that he has some hidden versatility as a receiver as well, which we saw multiple times down at the Shrine Bowl. He finally got to run some routes out there with the tight ends, and he looked pretty smooth and reliable as a receiver. So kind of looking at this new age fullback profile that a lot of teams want, which is basically just a fullback that can catch, I think Jack Colletto is somebody in this class who might offer that versatility. Plus, if you're really screwed at linebacker and you take a whole bunch of injuries, he's got experience doing that, and he plays special teams. Again, he's one of these guys where I'm not entirely sure what position he's going to play. I just know I want him on the roster, and we will figure it out as we go. Is he a linebacker? Is he a fullback? Is he a tight end? The answer is yes, and that's why I'm taking him. So once again, to recap this entire draft, we got Bryce Young at 2nd overall. We traded picks 12 and 74 for Tee Higgins, which is a win. We took Will McDonald, the edge from Iowa State, at 34, Luke Musgrave at 66, Daiyan Henley at 105, Chandler Zavala at 135, Desjuan Johnson at 139, Deuce Vaughn at 189, Demario Douglas at 202, Juice Scruggs at 204, Marte Mapu at 208, and Jack Colletto all the way down at pick 240. It's a big draft class, but a great draft class in my opinion, and one that potentially, maybe, hopefully, could kickstart the Texans to going from a bottom feeder to a contender in just a couple of years. Okay, that'll do it for the draft. If I made any of the moves that you agree with, please let me know why down below. If you think I'm a total piece of shit and you disagree with the moves that I made, also tell me why down below, because I'll pay for therapy, but I won't pay for engagement, so I kind of rely on you guys for that. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. Also, as it relates to the rookies that I drafted, especially the skill position rookies, if you kind of want to jump on that train early as it relates to fantasy football, some of you are thinking, I draft in August, Brett. How does this help me remotely? You don't have to draft in August. You can draft right now. If you're looking ahead and you kind of want to get value on, say, this year's Dameon Pierce, You go to Underdog, you can draft all of your best ball leagues starting literally right now. So not just the Texans rookies that I pointed out today, but any rookie. Like if you're obsessed with Zay Flowers or Xavier Hutchinson or Bijan or Gibbs or whoever, it doesn't really matter. If you're obsessed with any one of these guys, you think that they're going to be an absolute superstar, you can go and draft them right now before they're even drafted in the actual league. And this is probably when you're going to get the best possible value. Like a lot of these guys they're going literally the last round, and they're going to be 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 yard players. So if you're a fantasy football fiend like I am and you want to get ahead of everybody else, go to Underdog, draft them right now. You can use promo code Brett. That'll double your deposit up to $100. You get a whole bunch of extra money to play with. This is the best value you're going to get on all these guys literally all year. It's only going to go up between now and August. So if you're going to jump on it, now's the time.